Okay, so I've started a new metric part. And I'm going to build an impeller for the centrifugal pump. And your design will alter. You'll have to decide, what actually works best in your situation. But I want to show you a way to design this so you can try a lot of different things, recapturing the efforts you put into creating the sketch. So the first thing we're going to do is loft this impeller blade. And so to do that, we need a series of planes. So we can do a sketch on each of the planes and expand the solid from through one sketch to the next sketch to the next sketch through the planes. So we're going to start with a coincident plane. And it wants to know what's the reference plane. So I'm going to take this XY. And it creates it, and I'm going to pull it up to the top, or what's going to be the top, and that's 40 millimeters. And now I have a plane that's 40 millimeters above my XY plane. So I'm going to take a second coincident plane, and I'm going to take that XY plane again. And this time I'm only going to go 20 millimeters up. And finally, I'm going to place a coincident plane on the XY plane. It's not going to move, and it's good practice to use an independent plane for this. So let's move in a little bit. And now I'm going to work on this bottom plane. And the first thing I'm going to do is create some sketches that I'll build the impeller shape out of. So to begin with, I'm going to start with a circle. And it's going to be a 10 millimeter circle. And I'm going to lock it on this bottom plane. And I'm going to lock my circle in there. And then I'm going to change to a 60 millimeter diameter. And as soon as I hit enter, it knows it's just 30 millimeter radius, which is kind of cool. It lines up, so they're concentric. And then I can go ahead and get rid of this. And I'm going to go to my sketch view. And so now I'm looking at it. And so like the center of the whole impeller piece is going to be in the center, obviously. And then our blade is going to be out in here. And we'll encase that later. So the first thing we're going to do is to take an arc by 3 points. And so we can come in and figure out where you want to start. Take it over to the outside edge, and then you can choose exactly how much of a bend you want in either direction. And part of the experiment here is to find out what moves water the best. A little research might tell you some things. Sometimes trial and error works pretty well. So I'm going to take this shape here, and then I'm going to put a second one on, tangent by 3 points, come to a new spot, bring it straight across, make sure it touches the edge, and now I have a shape. All right, so that's pretty cool. So then what we're going to do is we're going to trim out, because we no longer need the rest of this circle, and we don't need the rest of this circle. And so now we have a shape that actually looks like something we want to deal with. So we're going to go back, and now we want to project this shape up to our top plane. And then we're also going to project this shape to our center plane, but then we're going to move it. So the first thing we're going to do is unlock the sketch plane. And then we're going to come over to this place which says project to sketch. And I'm going to just click on the top plane and lock it. Say okay. And then I'm going to zoom in a little bit down here. And it set to single wireframe. We could do maybe a wireframe chain and pick the whole thing. And we'll say fine. And as we back out, we see that, oh, it went all the way up where we wanted it to. We're going to do the same thing to the middle, except once we get it to the middle, we want to rotate it. So I'm going to unlock the sketch plane again. I'm going to say project to a sketch plane. I'm going to go to sketch 5 or plane 5. So we're locked in on that now. And we'll take this wireframe chain and I'll say okay. And that took it up. And then we can then say single wireframe. And I'm going to come in and pick the x-axis and the y-axis. All right, so in the center, we have the original point straight above this one, and we have our shape here. Okay, we have the 3 sketches, each one on its own plane. In addition, on this, what's called plane 5 here, we also have this extra set of lines that were projected up from the X and Y down in the bottom plane. And now we have a center point to rotate things around. So the first thing we want to do is zoom in so we can see it. And we're going to come get the rotate command. And I will put in a set of 12. And right now it wants us to click on the elements to modify. So the first thing I want to do is to uncheck this rotate and copy. All right. And so that way we don't get a copy, we get the original moves. And I'm going to stretch a fence around. So we're picking that and it knows that it's all picked. And then it wants to know the center of rotation. So I'm going to unclick that, make sure that it's unclicked. Here's the center of rotation. I'm going to pull this out so it's in a nice straight line. And then when I pick up, we've got it. Now, I can then go in and delete the original sketch because it would just get in the way. And so now let me zoom out and you can see that they're at different angles. All right, so now that we're at different angles, we can basically come in and do a lofting for this. So I want to be able to see these, and I'm going to be picking the corners because the corners we want to keep lined up. If we accidentally pick the wrong corner, then the solution has to basically eat itself and it'll throw an error. So when we go to Loft, we want to make sure that when we come in and pick this, you see the little dot on that bottom corner? We want to make sure there's a dot on that bottom corner on each one of these. So I'm going to pick the bottom one, and then I'm going to slide to the middle one, and you see the green arrow, that's showing us I'm going from here to here. And then when I come up to pick the top, if I pick the outside edge, then it would give us an error message, but I'm picking the inside edge. I'm going to right click and we get the basically the great shape that's there. All right, so now I can come and I can take these sketches and turn the sketches off. I'm going to need that sketch there. And I'll just turn off plane 6 and I'll turn off plane 4. And I left the sketch on plane 5 because this is where I want to work next. So what happens, we want to be able to basically create a center shaft for this, because an impeller has a shaft and then it's got all these fins that radiate out. We've drawn the fin. Now we need the center shaft. And I left those sketch showing so we can then come in and I'm going to draw a circle, the correct size. I'm going to touch on this plane that we left on. I'm going to highlight that and I can see that my lock is on. So I'm going to go into a sketch view and I'm going to sketch a circle. And now it could go right to the edge and hit that, but I'm going to come a little farther and I'm going to say I want 12 millimeters. So it encompasses the end of the fin. It all becomes one solid chunk. And now I'm going back into an isometric view. So I'm going to extrude. I'm going to make sure that we're doing it symmetrically. I'm going to make sure we're adding it because I want a shape. We don't want to cut away of this. And I'll make sure that I pick the entire circle and say fine. And I'm going to bring this up and I want a distance of 42. So it's about 1 millimeter beyond above and 1 millimeter beyond below. So there's our center shaft. Now, I know that the motor that I'm going to connect this to has a center shaft of 2.1 millimeters. So I could put a hole there. And I would come over here and say, I want a hole. And I'm going to make that hole and I'm going to do this in a metric hole. And the size is going to be a 2.1. It's going to be an exact. I'm going to through everything and I'm going to say, okay. And I'm going to lock it on that face right there. And I'll touch the edge. So I get that center point and then I can lock on it. And now I've got a hole through the whole thing. Now, when we go to work on this, I know that any place that has a nice sharp edge is going to be prone to tearing and bending. So I'm going to use a little round and I'm going to take the back edge and the front edge. 2 millimeters seems like a nice way to go. So looks good from my porch. So I'll say, okay. So now I have the fin, the fillet that's going to strengthen it. I also have a hole through the center. And so what we're going to do now, we are going to concentrate on the fin. I'm going to highlight that. And the round, so I'll hold my control key down while I pick them both. And then I can come over here to pattern. And this is a circular pattern. And it wants to know, well, where's your circle going to be? And when we look at it, you see it's giving me the center point of that. And it wants to know how many copies of it do I want? Well, except 3 to start with. And now I've got 3 fins, right? Perfect. Now I can come back here and I say, you know, I really meant to say 5. And in this way, we can create numerous impellers just by, coming into the pattern and saying, oh, let me try 8 this time. This lets us really, experiment a little bit and play a little bit and allows us to really work on some of this pieces. All right, and you can always turn things off that you don't want. You can say, oh, I don't want this sketch showing. I don't want this sketch showing. And let's see, even turn off the base, turn off the PMI, because we're just looking at things. So now we can see the center shaft that's going to fit over our motor. And now we can just take and we can look through it. Yep, we got a hole through it and we can see the sides. And anytime you want to try it a little differently, we can always go back to the pattern and say, oh, well, 8 didn't work, so I'm going to change it to 2. And now I've got an impeller with just 2 fins.